Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first edition of the Running the Bases podcast. I'm your host, Michael Garaffa, and welcome to the beginning of what should be a very fun time here on the Running the Bases podcast. On this podcast, we're going to be discussing things between MLB news, MLB highlights, stat leaders, along with hitters of the week, pitchers of the week, team of the week, division leaders, and some amazing hitters right now. So let's get right into it. This is going to be a lot of fun. I myself personally am a big avid fan of baseball, and something that I've always wanted to do is just talk about baseball. And me with my good old buddies back in New York, because that's where I'm from. Well, we used to talk about a lot of sports, but me and my good friend Ben, we used to talk about really MLB. We had our own show, the MLB Whip Around, but obviously MLB Whip Around's already taken, so I couldn't really do that because we're a little bit of a higher level here. But we've got a little bit of a message from my good friend Ben here that I wanted to let you guys hear. He's a really great kid. Ben, take it away.
What up, Mikey Stash? Just wanted to give you some good luck on your new show and just wanted to give you my 2 cents as a Yankees fan here. I'm very excited, but I do not think the Yankees will win the World Series, that they do not get home field advantage in the playoffs. That is ultimately very important. The Astros, the three-headed snake of Verlander, Cole, and Greinke, it's going to be very hard to stop. The Yanks got to secure home field in the regular season. Need Boone to start taking it a little more seriously here in September and not pitch guys like Ryan Dull in important 0-0 games. All right, see you, Mike.
So that is my good friend Ben. Got to really give a lot of thanks to Ben. He's always been a part of this. He is the reason really why I wanted to do this podcast, mainly because of our time back in New York doing our MLB Whip Around show. We also have a little bit of a nice little homage from another member of that podcast that I did. He wasn't a member of our MLB podcast, but he was a member of the Colts Corner that we did, which is what we initially started from, and he's got a little message too.
What's up, Mikey Stats? Good luck with this new podcast, man. I know you're going to do great. Just never forget those early days at the Colts Corner podcast with your boys, all right? Have a great time. You're going to do awesome.
And I hope to, in the future, have these guys on to talk a little bit about baseball. You know, I'll FaceTime them and get to hear what they have to say. So let's get into the real baseball aspects of it. There have been a lot of things going on. Basically, each Running the Bases episode is going to be breaking down everything from the last week. And really, the way I'm going to do that is I've got a little template here from MLB news highlights and everything. And this Running the Bases podcast covers everything from Tuesday, August 27th to this Tuesday, September 3rd. Obviously, news that happened this morning, but no highlights that have happened so far in the day. So really, it's covering everything up to yesterday. But if something big happened this morning, I obviously will be covering it. So the first thing I want to talk about here in the MLB news from the past week, this happened a little while ago on actually August 31st. The Kansas City Royals owner David Glass and his family announced on Friday that they were going to sell the Kansas City Royals to a group of investors, which is led by John Sherman, a local businessman. The sale is expected to be worth about $1 billion, and Glass was quoted later on saying that the decision to sell the Royals was difficult for our family. He said, so really my take on this, there's a lot to really dive into here, but I mean, this is a very interesting thing to talk about here. I mean, you don't see teams getting sold every day, especially to local businessmen. And for $1 billion to sell the team, that seems about right. But the Royals, I mean, there's so much to talk about with the Royals. They are a team who, I mean, just a few years ago in 2015, won the World Series against, a little spoiler here, my personal favorite team, the New York Mets. But they won the World Series in 2015, and here they are selling their team just a short few years later, which really baffles me. And I think that baffled the baseball world that they went out there and they really just, I really don't understand why they did this. Just middle of the season, went out and did it, not even in the off season. So very, very interesting, just as a baseball fan and from a baseball standpoint, this is one of those things that surprised me, but it also kind of flew under the radar a little bit because the Royals have fallen off so much, which is such an interesting topic. The next thing I want to talk about here is Tyler Skaggs' autopsy being revealed. This actually was just revealed recently, but they announced finally Tyler Skaggs died a little bit over a month ago. It really shocked the baseball world, but we have been waiting this entire time to figure out what he actually died of. We knew that he died in his hotel room, but it came out just in the last week that Tyler Skaggs died of an accidental overdose. The autopsy reveals that fentanyl, oxycodone, as well as alcohol were found in Tyler Skaggs' system, a pitcher for the Los Angeles Angels. And according to the information released by a Texas medical examiner over 2 months ago, I mean, it's been 2 months really that this took place, and it it's taken a very long time to get this done, but there have been also rumors speculating that it was a member of the Angels staff that actually could be linked to this, that maybe kind of spiked something that Skaggs was drinking. But I'm very, very surprised by this. It's always been said that Tyler Skaggs was such a great guy. Everybody was praising him. And a lot of people are wondering, well, does this kind of really affect the way you see him as a person? Does it skew your view of him? And to me, it does in a way if he did it on purpose, but he didn't do it on purpose. They're saying that it was accidental overdose, which could mean that he was a drug abuser and doing these things. But we also heard things in the last week that a lot of players use drugs to try and cope with the pain that they have as a baseball player, which definitely would have to hinder my view of him. But he's also been said to be a really great guy, and you never know. He may have been dealing with other personal demons that we didn't know about, that he was trying to take his own life, and this was just one final go around and saying, you know what, I'm going to have one final send off. I know this is going to be the last thing I ever do. Let me try and enjoy myself a little bit. So that's a little bit about Tyler Skaggs. I was very surprised when I heard that news, and a little bit saddened because that's now the second pitcher in a matter of a few years that died related to something involving drugs and stuff like that, with Jose Fernandez a few years ago. And now on a little bit more of a baseball actual playing standpoint and a little bit of a positive note, we are kicking off the last MLB bit of news with Aristides Aquino, the right fielder for the Cincinnati Reds, being the fastest player in Major League history to hit 15 home runs. I mean, if you watch baseball, you know who Aristides Aquino is. I mean, you've been hearing about him for a little while now. It's been over a month that he's been in the big leagues, and this kid has hit the big leagues by storm. Imagine if he started the year where he would be right now in home runs. He would probably be in the 50 range, but it's really impressive what this kid has done. He's even been able to kind of put himself in a Rookie of the Year kind of talk, even though that's really not going to happen with Pete Alonso really settling that a long time ago. But I mean, this is a kid who really gives the Reds a bright future. I mean, he's a guy who, I never even knew who he was. And I study farm systems really a lot, and I look at farm systems, and I never even heard of this guy. And he comes onto the scene and he bursts in saying, hey, I'm here and I'm here to stay. I mean, he had like 7 home runs in his first 9 games. It was amazing what he was doing. You would see highlights of him every day. It seemed like every day I was getting Aristides Aquino. It's another home run. And it's just amazing what he's been able to do. So that'll wrap up the MLB news. The next thing we have going here are the MLB highlights from the past week. This is going back to Tuesday, August 27th, exactly a week ago. You had Pete Alonso setting the club record in home runs. That is a very important thing for the New York Mets. The New York Mets first baseman Pete Alonso is in his rookie season right now, and he set the club record in home runs by hitting his 42nd. That's right, his 42nd home run of the year for a rookie. That is amazing. And for a rookie to set his club record in home runs is something pretty improbable. So that was awesome. And for me as a Mets fan, I've been loving watching Pete Alonso all year this year, being able to mash it on the field. And another thing in New York news that happened for the Yankees was that Aaron Judge hit his 100th career home run, and what has been an amazing start to a career for him. He is sitting on pace right now to have a boatload of home runs in his career. He's making a push that if you look down at the end of his career, he may end up getting mid 500s right now. He could even push for 600, which is such an amazing thing. I mean, we've seen so many Yankees be absolute masters of the baseball, and Aaron Judge is just another one of those guys in there. So very amazing for Aaron Judge, and good for him. He's certainly earned it. And I must say, I mean, he's a guy who you're going to count on to go out there every single day and try and hit a home run in a big spot. And that's what he's been able to do. Then we move on to Wednesday, August 28th. This is when Aristides Aquino hit his 13th home run. So he's actually hit 2 more since then. But obviously in this time, I was really kind of I was keeping a little bit of a log of what was taking place each day. So I didn't miss anything. I didn't want to leave anything out that was important. And this obviously was a very big thing, just hitting 13 home runs in your rookie year in the stretch that he's been having. Just wanted to give a little bit of a bit of a note to that, even though I don't need to go in detail because I already talked about it. Then we move on to Thursday, August 29th. This one hit a little bit hard at home because it was against the New York Mets when Victor Caratini hit 2 home runs against Jacob deGrom. He drove in all 4 runs with a home run in the beginning of the game, made it 1-0, and then hit a 3-run home run, which is an absolute blow to the Mets and their fan base at the time with that big 3-run homer when the Mets were looking to be in a playoff push. It was a huge game. The Mets were being at the moment, they were being swept 2-0 by the Cubs, and Victor Caratini puts down this final blow, made it 4-1, and the Mets were about to be swept by the Cubs in one of the most important series they were going to have of the year. So that was certainly a big moment for Victor Caratini, but another big moment for a young player. Harold Ramirez, the rookie on the Miami Marlins, hit a walk-off home run against the Reds in the bottom of the 12th. And this was something that actually got a lot of hype about it because it was this kid's rookie season and he got an up and in pitch. It wasn't even in the strike zone. It was really more at his hands and he turned on it. He cranked it into left field. It was an absolute bomb and it got the win for the Miami Marlins, which is a huge win for them and really an almost just atrocious season. So it's great to see something like that happen for that kind of team. Then we have Hyunjin Ryu. He gave up 7 earned runs against the D-backs and his ERA went up almost a whole point to 2.35 over his last few starts. And this was all on Thursday that this happened. And I mean, 7 runs in one game for a guy who's making a push for the Cy Young. He's really not having a good stretch right now. And you have to believe that Hyunjin Ryu's Cy Young race may end up being at risk. I mean, this is a guy who we had penciled in for Cy Young for the entire year until he got hurt. Then obviously people started to question that a little bit because once someone gets hurt like that, you really wonder, is he really going to be the Cy Young or not? But with the pace that he was going, everyone thought he was going to get it. Even with the injury, he had a 1.48 ERA at one point in the season. Now he's up to 2.35, which is really not that great. It's really a lot higher than some pitchers in the league, and especially some who are contending for this. So this really leaves the door open for Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, who are actually, ironically enough, going head-to-head tonight in a game between the Mets and the Nationals. This is going to be a very interesting kind of stretch for these guys. I'll talk a little bit about that DeGrom-Scherzer game next week on the Running the Bases because obviously I don't know what happens yet, but that could end up being a game that determines the Cy Young already. Because let's say Jacob deGrom throws 9 innings, gives up 2 hits and 10 strikeouts and maybe only walks 1 guy, and Scherzer only maybe goes 7 innings, allowing 2 or 3 runs. That may be a marquee matchup that could determine a Cy Young, especially with the way that Hyunjin Ryu has been pitching as of late. So that's a game that you want to keep your eye on, especially as a baseball fan. That could be a really much more interesting game and important game to both of these pitchers than you would imagine. So let me move on to Friday. And Friday has 2 more things. Todd Frazier. Obviously, I have some Mets things in here, but I mean, don't think that I'm biased. These are just really cool things that I thought I might want to mention. And Todd Frazier hit 2 3-run home runs in back-to-back innings against the Philadelphia Phillies in a routing of the Phillies that the Mets put on that game. The Phillies ended up making it up a little bit, scoring a few runs in the last inning, but the Mets went on and they poured it on in the last 3 innings, scoring 11 runs in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. That is something that doesn't happen very much for any team. And it was an important game for the Mets, especially after what they had going the day before with Victor Caratini hitting the 2 home runs against the Mets and Jacob deGrom. So a big game for them. Todd Frazier, obviously 2 3-run home runs in back-to-back innings doesn't happen very often. That's 6 RBIs in one game. I mean, how improbable is that? That's in of itself a feat. And just to be able to do it with 2 big swings of the bat and 2 important at-bats are huge for Todd Frazier. The next one is the Red Sox beating the Angels thanks to a go-ahead home run in the 15th by Mookie Betts. But that wasn't all that was interesting about this. What was really interesting is that Mookie Betts hit a home run in the first inning to lead off the game, and he hit the home run that ended up deciding the game, which doesn't happen very often. And Mookie Betts most definitely enjoyed that. 2 home runs in one game is an amazing thing to put on your mantelpiece anytime, but to do it in a way where you're giving your team the lead in the 15th inning that ends up being the difference in the game is something really special. So next up here, we go on to Saturday, August 31st, the last day of August, and the Twins. There's only one little note here for highlights. The Twins set the record for the most home runs in a season in baseball history with 268, which was such an impressive moment for the Twins. They beat out the Yankees record that they set, which was seemingly an unbeatable record at the time, but the Twins right now, at the last day of August, they have all of September to tack onto this record. The home run hitting machine team in baseball that's not even one of the best teams. Well, they are one of the best, but they are not the best team in baseball, which is pretty interesting thanks to their pitching really holding them back. But that's something amazing, and they're just going to keep tacking onto this, what is going to end up being one of the most difficult records to break because of the mark that they are setting. There's a lot of things you could talk about with that record where the ball's really juiced this season, which we have heard pitchers like Justin Verlander say, and other batters have said that the balls feel different when they hit them. That's something that you can keep in mind. Maybe that is an actual factor in whether people are going to consider this a legitimate, really record at the time. But I mean, if you think about it, the Yankees record seemed almost improbable, but baseball is going to be shattering home run records this year by a boatload. So you've got to wonder, maybe this won't be considered as special as it really should be with the amount of home runs that the Twins have really hit this season. Then move on to Sunday, September 1st. There are three really, really great things that I want to talk about here. Three amazing things for baseball in of itself. The first one was Justin Verlander throwing his third no-hitter in his career. Any no-hitter is amazing. Coming from a Mets fan, there's only been one no-hitter in Mets history, and you've got a guy who's thrown his third now in his entire career. That's pretty impressive. He went out there and he did it in the Rogers Center in Toronto for his second straight no-hitter in the Rogers Center. That is another impressive feat. And you've got to say, this is an amazing thing for Justin Verlander. You could see the emotion on his face when he came out and he did this. It was so amazing for him to be able to go out there, really just show up, and he dominated. It was absolute domination out there for Justin Verlander. An amazing thing for him. But something that's even more amazing that I think every baseball fan can enjoy was Carlos Carrasco making his return from leukemia. He was able to pitch one inning in relief. He's been out for over 2 months from battling this really horrible disease, and he was able to come back, make his outing, and when he walked on the field, he was on the road, and they ended up giving him a standing ovation, which was one of the most special things, in my opinion, of the year. That's going to go down as one of the coolest moments of the year. He was trying so hard not to even cry on the mound because of how amazing it felt. Could you imagine having such a heartbreaking thing happen to you in the middle of a season, being able to come back, step onto the mound, and have the opposing fans up and applauding for you? It's just an amazing moment that I don't think Carlos Carrasco is ever going to forget for the rest of his life. And the last thing here, the Yankees were able to get back-to-back home runs to walk it off in a stunner against the Oakland Athletics. In the bottom of the ninth, they came up, they had Brett Gardner hit a game-tying home run, and then Mike Ford back-to-back with a bomb. That doesn't happen very often, and when it does, it makes headline news. And to walk it off against the Oakland Athletics, who are making a serious wildcard push right now, it had to hurt for the A's. That was a real stunner, feeling like you have that win. Being up by 1 run doesn't always feel secure, especially this year in which closers have made the third highest blown save percentage in Major League history. You've got to feel a little bit wary when your team is up by only 1 run in the last inning. But, you've got to feel good when you know you've got your closer coming in. But back-to-back home runs just shattered that hope for the Oakland Athletics. And then we have one more thing here from Monday. This was yesterday, Monday, September 2nd. The Yankees get shut out for the first time in 220 games. So the Yankees go from an amazing game with the back-to-back home runs to walk it off against the Oakland Athletics. And then they get shut out the next day for the first time in 220 games, which is the second longest streak in Major League history. There have been a lot of teams that have played the Yankees that have stellar pitching that have not been able to shut them out. That's a very hard thing to do. And for the Rangers, of all the teams to do it, is such a shock, because the Rangers are not an offensive happy team, but they do have some guys in there that can kill you, but they also don't have the pitching. Their pitching has not been there really all year, but they have Mike Minor on the mound, and that's the only guy who can guarantee yourself a really good start from. He really should be the Cy Young in the AL this year, but Justin Verlander's having himself a great year alongside some other guys. But when you have a guy like Mike Minor on the mound going against the Yankees, you've got to feel maybe we can scratch one, but they couldn't even get one. And they even had a few relievers come into the game, which just made it even more crazy for the Yankees to take a loss in that game. So that'll do it for the highlights of the last week. A lot of them happened, and a lot of them were really great, but there are some that obviously stand out more than the others, like Carlos Carrasco returning to the mound as some of the really highlight things. But all of these were something really incredible. Then we will move on to the batting and pitching stat leaders in baseball. We're only going to go over some really important stats and some important races, close races right now that are taking place. There are 3 in the NL, and then there are going to be a couple in the AL as well. But I want to kick it off with the batting average race in all of baseball, really. The batting average in all of baseball is really, really great right now, with Anthony Rendon now leading the pack with a .337 batting average in what should be his MVP season. But he's obviously not going to get that because of what Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger have been doing, but with a 337 batting average, that's so amazing and so impressive. And then you've got Brian Reynolds of the Pittsburgh Pirates in his rookie season. He's coming out here. He's got a 335 batting average. So that's also amazing. Those two are leading the NL. And then you've got Christian Yelich with a 326 in third, and Jeff McNeil, who was leading it for a long time with a 322. He is out in fourth. Then when you look at the AL, some really interesting names up here. DJ LeMahieu, a previous batting champion, batting 332 this year. He leads the AL. Michael Brantley with a 327 is in second with the Houston Astros. His first season with the Astros has been an amazing one. And man, that is something to really look forward to. But the number 3 guy with a 323 batting average is Hanser Alberto, the second baseman for the Orioles. I guarantee you that not many people listening to this know who that even is. So that's pretty impressive for a guy like that to really take off and have the amazing season that he's having. And rounding out the top 10, we've got Rafael Devers with 321, tied with Ketel Marte with 321, and Charlie Blackmon with 320 for the top 10 in all of baseball. So that's a pretty impressive race. There's no clear winner here. There's a lot of guys in that race that can really take the win, as well as this next category, the home runs. Right now, the top 5 are all separated by 4 home runs. That's pretty impressive. Sitting atop the major league home run leaders is Cody Bellinger with 44. Then we have 3 guys tied with 43. We've got my man Pete Alonso from the New York Mets, Mike Trout of the Los Angeles Angels having arguably the best season he's ever had with 43, and Christian Yelich as well with 43 in his season after MVP. He's going out there putting up MVP numbers again. So that's impressive. And Eugenio Suarez hit his 40th just the other day, which is another impressive mark as he looks to really crush some Reds team records. So that's going to be pretty cool. And that's been such an impressive race all year long, with Pete Alonso really following Bellinger and Yelich all season. Then Mike Trout shot ahead of everybody else. And then Pete Alonso picked it up and has hit a few while Cody Bellinger and Yelich have been slumping. So it's been one of the most interesting races in all of baseball. That NL home run race, and even MLB you can really consider, because Mike Trout really putting himself in there has been a lot of fun. But I think it's safe to say Mike Trout really has won that race, because the second place man in the AL and home runs is Jorge Soler with 38. And then below him, you have to go a little bit further with 36 and Max Kepler. And then you've got Josh Bell, who has 35 for the NL. That's a guy who was up there and he was leading that race for a little while. So he fell off a little bit. He's had a really rough second half since that All-Star break. It's just been really a slog for him. So that was another interesting little matchup there. But you look at the RBIs, Josh Bell finds himself in the top 3 there. 114 from Freddie Freeman, leads all of baseball. The NL's got the top 5 spots in RBIs. So clearly the NL's an RBI happy league, but Anthony Rendon sits with 111, just an amazing year for him. Josh Bell with 110, Eduardo Escobar with 110, and Nolan Arenado with 107. And the first guy in the AL is Jose Abreu, as he's tied with Rafael Devers. So it's been quite the interesting season for all these guys. I mean, all of them are having such spectacular seasons, and you've got to wonder, man, this is going to be one hefty stretch as we look down. There's so many people who are just so close. Then we move over to the ERA side. We look at pitchers now. Hyunjin Ryu with a 2.35 ERA. That was really just a number for Hyunjin Ryu that you could look next to his name a while ago that was untouchable with a 1.48. But he has put himself only up by 11 tenths of a point. I mean, Max Scherzer is 2.46, which is right hot on Hyunjin Ryu's tail, which is followed by Mike Soroka, who's got a 2.53. So Hyunjin Ryu, one more poor start can really rocket him out of the top, which is somewhere that he's been all year long. So I mean, that's so improbable. And the number 1 guy in the AL in ERA is Justin Verlander, which is why I believe that Justin Verlander is going to have himself another Cy Young season this year. But there's a lot of guys in the AL that could also really win it. I mean, you look at Mike Minor with a 3.12 ERA. If you look back 6-7 years, a 3.12 ERA is really good enough to put you in the top 2 in a Cy Young, if not winning that Cy Young. So the ERA is really, it's been a fun time. And now I don't look at wins as a stat, just because I'm a Mets fan, and last year with Jacob deGrom's wins made me realize that wins really don't matter. So I don't look at wins, but strikeouts is something that I really want to look at as well. Garrett Cole leading the majors in strikeouts with 266. Who's in second? Justin Verlander with 257. So as you mentioned, Ben, before in the beginning of the podcast, talking about that 3-headed monster. Well, that 3-headed monster is proven to be pretty amazing, because if you look down a little bit farther, Zach Greinke's 29th in the big leagues with 158. That's not a lot. I mean, he's 100 down from Justin Verlander, but it doesn't matter. Those guys strike out a bunch of guys, And if you look at it, they have over 600 strikeouts just between 3 pitchers. That is so amazing. And that's a number that doesn't really get hit very often between the top 3 pitchers. I mean, the Nationals are making a push for that as well. Steven Strasburg, 215, Patrick Corbin, 200, and Max Scherzer, 200. They have over 600 as well. But, I mean, those are 2 of the most powerhouse pitching rotations in baseball. The Mets have a really good one as well, but their strikeouts have been a lot lower this year. So the strikeout race is really no question in the AL side going to go to an Astro, because in third place in the AL is Shane Bieber with 224. He is 40 below Garrett Cole. So I don't think that's going to ever change. And leading in the NL, thanks to his time in the AL, he had 222. I mean, if you look at these guys, the top 6 are all people who were in the AL for the entire first half of the season. Matthew Boyd was on the Tigers, is in 5th. Chris Sale is in 6th, and he's out for the year, which is another really, really sad thing for him, because he was making a push for a record in strikeouts. So, I mean, if you look at these guys, I mean, Trevor Bauer with 222 is ahead of Steven Strasburg by only 7 strikeouts, and he was in the AL all year long. So that's going to be another interesting race. And the last thing I want to look at here are saves. Saves is something that is really an interesting number, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you were having an amazing day. Because if you look at this, Kirby Yates, the number 1 guy with 39 saves, he's got a 1.29 ERA, but he's also 0-5, which is a lot of blown saves. So you can have really a lot of saves just because your team put you in a position to have a save. Typically, you want to have a game where you don't have to have a save, because it means that you guys are blowing away. You know, you don't want to be that close. It means that you guys are in a safe position to win. Typically, when you have to have those saves, it really means that you're close enough that it's a little bit scary in there. But with certain guys like Kirby Yates or Aroldis Chapman, you've got to feel good about your chances. But Sean Doolittle's actually the number 6 guy on here with 28, and he is a guy who's blown almost as many saves as I've ever seen a closer blow. So saves aren't really an amazing number to look at, but I wanted to point it out there because Kirby Yates with 39, obviously that's a really high number. So that'll do it for the batting and pitching leaders. Then we are going to move on to the hitter of the week. Every week I'm going to look at the stats from the last 7 days and pick out a player that is hit better than I believe anybody else. And we start this one off. The very first hitter of the week here on the Running the Bases podcast goes to Anthony Rendon. He has batted .526 in the last week with 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. Those RBIs are actually really high. If you think about it, in 1 week, that's an average of an RBI a day, which is overall really, really productive. But the real thing that stands out to me is a .640 on base percentage in just 1 week. That is so amazing that really is very rarely replicated. And you've got to think, I mean, a .640 on base percentage, that means that over half of the time you come up to the plate, you are getting on base. That is so amazing that it doesn't happen. 3 out of your 5 at-bats, you're going to get on. So that's amazing for the Nationals in a guy who is entering his free agent year where he's going to have to try and get a big contract. He's making a really good statement out there playing every day for the Nationals. So a good thing for him. He has certainly earned the recognition that he's gotten, and he hasn't even gotten recognition that I think he deserves. I mean, he's, in my opinion, one of the most underrated players in baseball. The pitcher of the week, there's really no question about this one when you look at the stats. It's Justin Verlander. The guy's got a 0 ERA. I mean, having a 0 ERA in 14 2/3 innings is amazing. To add to that, he has a .35 whip, which is even more impressive. And that's a point lower than what some Cy Young Award winners will have in a season. And he has 18 strikeouts in that stretch, but obviously the real cherry on top is that no-hitter. You know, that's a little bit important that he had a no-hitter in there. So pitcher of the week, no question about it, Justin Verlander. Then we're going to move over to the team of the week. And the team of the week, this isn't actually what you think it is. You may think that I'm going to be picking like the Astros or the Yankees. What I'm actually doing here is I'm going position by position, picking a player that has been the best at that position in that week and building a team of the week. So the first one here, we start off with catcher. This is Yadier Molina, who has batted .526 with 3 homers and 5 RBIs with a .571 on base percentage. That .526 batting average is the same as Anthony Rendon's in the last week, so he most definitely deserves that spot there as catcher. The first baseman on this team of the week is going to have to be Freddie Freeman, who has batted .304, but out of all first basemen, .304 is actually really great with 3 homers and 9 RBIs. Those 9 RBIs are really what stood out to me. A .385 on base percentage is really great if you think about it over the course of a season. A .385 on base percentage is fantastic. But in the matter of a week, compared to some of the other numbers you're going to be hearing, it's not that amazing. But it is really good for the first baseman, and that's actually going to get him a spot on this team of the week. Then we move over to the second baseman with the highest batting average on this team. It's Colton Wong, who's got a 600 batting average. Don't let that fool you. He's had over 20 at-bats in this stretch. He's got a 652 on-base percentage with 1 home run and 7 RBIs in the last week. That is amazing. 652. That is almost 1/3 of his at-bats he's getting on base. That is so impressive. 1 out of 3 at-bats this guy's getting on base. That's a really good thing for the Cardinals who are trying to make a real division push right now. Then you move over to shortstop. This guy goes to the shortstop for the Red Sox, Xander Bogaerts, with 435 being his batting average in the last week. That is enough to put him atop all shortstop in baseball, really, in terms of being the shortstop of the week. 4 homers, another impressive number, which is the most home runs out of anybody on this team in the last week, with 7 RBIs, and a 480 on base percentage is also nothing to sneeze at. Then you move over to third base. That's going to be Anthony Rendon, who is our hitter of the week. Obviously, I just mentioned 526 with 3 homers and 7 RBIs with a 640 on base percentage. So that's another really impressive number there. Then you move over to the outfield and left field. We've got JD Martinez, the monster masher from the Boston Red Sox. The dude can hit. He's batting .450 with 3 homers and 10 RBIs with a 542 on base percentage in this time. This dude is really good. And if you don't know who JD Martinez is at this point, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast, because he is amazing. Then we move over to George Springer, the center fielder for the Houston Astros. He is the center fielder of the week with a 375 batting average, 3 homers, 10 RBIs, the same line as JD Martinez except for batting average, and a 546 OBP, which is on base percentage. So he is having quite the time. So you've got to believe that George Springer is going to absolutely tear it up this season, and a great week like that has got to feel good for the Houston Astros. Then you move over to the right fielder. This is for my Yankee fans out there, my good buddies, Doug and Ben. Aaron Judge is your right fielder of the week with a 333 batting average. Not many great right fielders last week. I really struggled to find this, but a 333 batting average with 3 homers, 5 RBIs, a 385 on base percentage is really not the best on this team. But you know what? I'll take it for right fielder of the week. To have that amount of hits in a week and with 3 homers in a week, that's always going to be something that you want to look at. So we don't have much more left to cover here on this amazing first Running the Bases podcast. But what I do want to talk about here is a little bit of the standings. I want to take a look at the wild card and NL East, NL Central, NL West, AL East, AL Central, AL West standings, or just division standings to make it short and to save a lot of time. But I chose not to do that. So you know what? It's okay. We're going to move on. The NL East standings we have at the top of the list. The Atlanta Braves are 85-54. They've clinched a 500 season. They were last year's NL Division champ. NL East Division champs, so they are hoping to go back-to-back. They've got a 6.5 game lead over the Washington Nationals, and as of right now, they've got a 19 for their magic number, which means that over that stretch between Nationals losses and Braves wins, they have the opportunity to get that number lower, and they really have a good chance to do that. So the Braves got to feel good atop the NL East, but the NL Central is really one of the most interesting divisions in baseball. It's the closest division in the entire National League. As you could see, the St. Louis Cardinals are 77-60. They're only 3 games ahead of the Chicago Cubs, who really have been dominant forces in that NL Central over the last few years, but they're falling off a little bit. The magic number for the Cardinals is 23, which is still not really that bad. I mean, with 23, there's a little bit more than that in total games left in the season. So they have the opportunity, but with only 3 games back for the Cubs, you've got to feel like there's a chance for them to come back, and the Brewers are still a little bit distance away at 7 games back. So if you are the Cardinals and you're a Cardinals fan, you've got to feel pretty good about your chances right now to make it in the NL Central. Then you look over at the NL West, there's really nothing to talk about here. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers show, and it's been the Los Angeles Dodgers show for a very long time, 90-50, and with a lot of games left in the season, I mean, they're on pace to hit way over 100 wins. So good for them. Another amazing season. I mean, the Dodgers are bound to win a World Series one of these years. I mean, they've been in it the last 2. They've been sadly beaten in the last 2. For me, I've been rooting for the Astros. And then I also last year had to root for the Red Sox because they beat the Yankees. But you know what? The Dodgers are a good team. And I don't always love the Dodgers because the Mets had to play them and, Chase Utley background. But, we're not going to get into that. And I know there are going to be some Dodgers fans listening to this, but you know what? The Dodgers are a really good team, and you guys are going to get your World Series win. I guarantee you that within a couple of years with the base that you have. But then we move over to the American League East. this has really been a runaway for the Yankees. The American League has really been a runaway for every team except for the AL Central, which is the worst division in baseball. But the American League East has gone really to the New York Yankees. The closest team you've got are the Tampa Bay Rays, who are 81-58, and they're 9 games back. So 15 is the magic number for the New York Yankees. Really no question about their winning opportunity there. That should be a really locked up division. They are 90-49, which is actually 1/2 game better than the Dodgers. So they have an opportunity to have a better record than the Dodgers at the end of the year, and they really have been playing well. But you heard Ben in the beginning of the video say that they're not going to get home field advantage, which is a very interesting thing to talk about because they have the best record in all of baseball, tied with the Astros. So that's going to be interesting to follow. Then we move over to the AL Central. And the AL Central, I mean, let's be honest. This is the worst division in baseball. Everybody knows that they've got one team at the top of that pack that has been dominating everybody, which is the Minnesota Twins, who I knew was going to have a good year this year. I just felt it. They went 85-52 to this point in the season. They're 5.5 games up on the Cleveland Indians, who have really fallen off lately, which is disappointing. Their magic number is 20, and everyone else is eliminated in that division except for the White Sox, who, you know what, if they win every game for the rest of the season and the Twins and the Indians lose every game the rest of the season as well, the White Sox can win the division, but that's not going to happen. But the Minnesota Twins are the division leaders right there. I mean, I think right now, based on the way this is looking, I think the Twins are going to win the division, and we may be seeing the Indians in a wild card. We'll get to the wild card in a minute. And then you go to the last division in baseball, the AL West. This is another one of those divisions where it's a runaway. You've got the Astros, who are 90-49, tied with the best record in baseball. That is amazing to cap on to the fact that they are 10.5 games up, which is one of the largest margins in baseball, other than the Dodgers, who are just commanding that NL West. But that's just, the Astros have been one of the best teams in baseball since 2017, and even before then, they've been really great. So something to keep your eye on there. The Houston Astros really going to be a favorite to win the World Series this year. But then we're going to take a little peek at the National League and American League wildcard standings. These are really interesting. This is where everything happens every year, where everyone's staring at the wild card race because it can really go anywhere some seasons, and some seasons it's a runaway. But this year, the wild card has been the most interesting part of baseball in terms of postseason races, other than the American League Central between the Minnesota Twins and the Cleveland Indians. But the NL wild card has been more interesting than anything because the top 4 teams that are not in the top 2 spots are all within 4 games of that second spot. And with not many games left in the season, that number seems a little bit larger, but it's possible to come back. In first place in the wild card, who have a really heavy standing over everybody else in the wild card race, they are the Washington Nationals at 77-59. They're 3.5 games up on the Cubs, who are in second, who are 74-63. So you've got to feel good for the Nationals, who are now, if you add that all up, they are 6 games up on the Philadelphia Phillies, who are the 3 team in the wild card. They're the ones that are on the brink. They are 2.5 back from the Cubs, the Phillies are, and then the Diamondbacks are 3.5 back from the Cubs. The Brewers and Mets are both tied at 4 back. So all of those teams really can do it right now. The Mets and the Brewers, I think, really have, the Mets and the Brewers they're really the outliers there, but I think the Mets have a chance. I've been watching the Mets obviously all year long. They have the magic in them, and they're playing really well right now. I don't think they're counted out. I think the Brewers are a team that I really don't think they can do it. I think they just have had a few lucky games, but I think because the Brewers have fallen off a lot lately, I don't think the Brewers are going to be in it, but I think the Mets have a chance. I've been watching them, and they feel really good, and they feel really confident about their chances. The Diamondbacks, though, I went to a Diamondbacks game yesterday, and man, those guys can hit. They've got some young talent on that team that really can hit the ball, but their pitching is what's going to hold them back. Their starting pitchers are really just non-existent, and their relievers are really not great either. So they're going to have to rely a lot on their offense, which is why I don't think they're going to make it either. But the Phillies are the team that I think have the best chance out of all of these guys to make it in, obviously, other than the Mets. As a Mets fan, I'm going to have to take the bias out of it. I think the Phillies have the best chance out of all 4 of these teams to actually beat the Cubs and get into that wild card and have a Nationals-Phillies wild card matchup, which is actually what I projected at the beginning of the year. I projected we were going to be having a Nationals-Phillies matchup in that wild card. So that'd be pretty interesting to take a look at. So that's something I wanted to just point out there for that National League wild card. But the American League wild cards actually made itself really interesting as of late, with 3 teams in there that are all within a game and a half of each other. Leading that wild card are the Tampa Bay Rays. They have a 81-58 record. They're only a half game up at the second place Indians, who are really having a slog of of a time right now. And in third are the Oakland Athletics, who are only a game out from the Indians and a game and a half from first place. The only interesting thing in there is, can the Boston Red Sox be a dark horse at 5.5 out from the Indians? But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anybody thinks that's going to happen. But the Athletics, Indians, and Rays all separated between a game and a half. That means that one of those teams is guaranteed to not make it. We're going to be seeing one of either the Rays, Indians, or Athletics not be in the postseason, and two of those teams are going to be going head-to-head in the wildcard game at some place, whether it's Cleveland, Tampa Bay, or Oakland. It's going to be one heck of a run. In my opinion, if you want my personal opinion, I think it's going to stay where it is. I think it's going to be Rays and Indians down the stretch. The Indians have been playing really well, but the Rays have been playing even better. And the Athletics have kind of fallen off a little bit. They've really stopped hitting as much as we know that they can. And their pitching is just not good enough, in my opinion, to get them there. But the Indians really, with the year that they've been having, you've got to feel good about their chances. So that's going to do it for the division leaders and wild card. Then we're going to get into the very last bit here in the podcast. That's going to be the amazing hitters right now. And I've got 5 hitters in here that I want to talk about. And we're kicking it off with who I believe is going to be the AL Rookie of the Year. These are just amazing hitters from the last 30 days. It's the beginning of September. I'm taking a peek at the last 30 games that they have had. And this is going to start off with Yordan Alvarez, who is batting .283 with 9 homers and 23 RBIs. That is going to be an amazing number that you're going to have to watch out for. In just the last 30 games, he has single-handedly been one of the most dominant forces in that Astros lineup, alongside Yuli Gurriel, who's batting .339 in this stretch with 7 home runs and 32 RBIs. So 2 guys right there for the Astros hitting in that lineup that are going to provide them runs. They're going to hit home runs, and they're really going to hit home runs in important spots, as we have seen them do. The number 3 guy here, they're in no particular order, but Aristides Aquino, it would be a little silly of me not to discuss him. The guy's batting .330 with 15 home runs and 34 RBIs. I think it's safe to say that is outstanding. So with a .330 clip in this time, for anybody, a .330 clip in 30 games is amazing. And for a rookie to do it in his first month of the big leagues with 15 home runs, the dude's getting .330 with some pop. So that's pretty cool. But the only thing is, you have to realize that's been really padded by his home runs. If he stops hitting home runs, his batting average is probably going to drop as well. Which brings us to the 4th guy here, which is Nicholas Castellanos, who has been traded to the Cubs since this 30 games, before this 30-game stretch began. And he, since joining the Cubs in these last 30 games, obviously not all of them have been since he joined the Cubs, but .339 batting average, 11 home runs, 20 RBIs. That is an amazing number that you want to look at and say, wow. I mean, 11 homers and 20 RBIs. I mean, it's been really diminished based on, I just mentioned Aristides Aquino, who has 15 homers and 34 RBIs, which is by far the best out of all of these guys. But I mean, Nick Castellanos has been amazing. Since leaving the Tigers, he's just been on a tear, and he's been one of the most dominant forces in that Cub lineup. So you've got to feel good if you're a Cubs fan here, seeing this kind of power coming out of your lineup. And then you go over to the last guy here that we're going to talk about here on this podcast. This is Wilson Ramos. A lot of people are kind of overlooking Wilson Ramos, but right now the guy's on a 25-game hitting streak. In these last 30 games, obviously he hasn't had that hitting streak going all 30, because that's kind of impossible, but Wilson Ramos batting .400 in his last 30 games with 3 homers and 21 RBIs, which just goes to show you that in this 25-game hitting streak, it's not like he's getting a hit a day. He's getting 2-3 hits a game, and he's driving in a boatload of runs, which is something he's done all year long. But it's so impressive to see what Wilson Ramos has, in fact, been able to do. So that'll do it here for the very first edition of the Running the Bases podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. Thank you to Blaze Radio for giving me this opportunity. And also a big thank you to everybody at ASU for being able to help me produce this podcast, for everyone who donated to this podcast setup. I really am thankful for all of you. And thank you to everybody who's listening. I hope you guys will join next week. For me, I'm your host, Michael Garaffa. We will see you all next week.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face. Tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.